If you're planning on taking transit on New Year's Eve, the TTC is trying to avoid this, overcrowding on the platforms at Union Station. Good afternoon. We're just 36 hours away from ringing in the new year. And the City of Toronto is outlining its plans to make sure that revelers can enjoy the celebrations and get to and from downtown events without any major problems. CTV's Siobhan Morris is covering this story and joins us live with the latest. Siobhan.
Natalie, the city says that what we saw play out last New Year's Eve at Union Station wasn't just uncomfortable, it was downright dangerous. And so they've made some changes to make sure that everybody is safe and in good spirits ringing in the new year. The city has planned a night of fun along the waterfront to say goodbye to 2024.
Local queer DJ collective Tracks and Feels will be spinning from 10 p.m. And we also have pop-up performances from InCirque, local circus performers both here and at Sherbourne Commons.
With plans for skating, dance lessons, and a film installation. But the real draw is, of course, the big light show, a 10-minute-long fireworks display.
There's actually 2 barges over Lake Ontario are viewable from anywhere in the inner harbor. So that's from Bathurst Quay Commons all the way to Sherbourne Commons.
The city expects 250,000 people to pack onto the waterfront.
TTC, GO Transit, and Up Express will offer free service starting at 7 p.m. on December 31st. Free service will run until 8 a.m. on January 1st.
To prevent scenes like this, the city is limiting access to Union Station after midnight.
To the doors located at Bay Street, just south of Front Street, through the Brookfield Place entrance.
It may mean lining up for a train outside, but officials say this is the best way to prevent a repeat.
If there had been an emergency in the station, we could not have effectively evacuated people.
Ensuring a safe start to the new year. The city is also encouraging people to use other transit stations rather than all funneling towards Union. Now, if you're worried about the weather, there is the chance of some rain or snow around fireworks time, but the city says they will go ahead no matter what. Reporting live from the waterfront, I'm Siobhan Morris. Natalie, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Siobhan. Just ahead, we'll break down the TTC's plans for New Year's Eve, so you'll be able to plan ahead for your party. The TTC's Stuart Green will join us in about 10 minutes with the details. Well, it looks like Toronto will close out 2024 with more mild, wet weather.
We're expecting above seasonal temperatures again today with showers and flurries. This is new video shot this morning following a very rainy weekend in the GTA. The wet conditions and melting snow had prompted authorities to issue a warning about possible increased runoff, rapidly changing water levels, and hazardous conditions near shorelines, rivers, and streams. This week, flurries are expected with daytime highs around the freezing mark. There have also been high winds over the past couple of days, and that is continuing. This is Whitby, where waves lashed the shoreline this morning. In Scarborough, multiple bus routes at Warden Station are using alternate platforms after flooding affected 2 bus bays. 4 bus platforms were also relocated inside. Meanwhile, mixed precipitations forecast for New Year's Eve in the GTA. The National Weather Agency is calling for snow and rain. And here's a live look at the city this afternoon. We have showers and high winds to start the week, and we're looking to remain above seasonal to round out the last few days of 2024. And if you've got plans for New Year's Eve, I'm guessing you should, pack an umbrella? I'll be chilling at home as I always do, but for those going out,
I'm going to a party in my living room. Like, the weather is going to be not great, to be perfectly honest. If you are going outside, you have to dress accordingly. I'm talking maybe a snowsuit, something that is waterproof for sure. The good news is, temperature-wise, we do remain above seasonal, but the weather is not going to be awesome for spending time outdoors. We're holding on to this kind of messy mix as we head throughout the day today. The good news is, because we are on the mild side, it's falling mostly as rain for the downtown core on and off throughout the day today. But the bigger issue is the wind. It is extremely breezy out there. So even though the rain is fairly light, it is blowing kind of everywhere. So it makes for a bit of a challenging commute. Temperature wise, we're sitting around 4 degrees right now with the wind chill. Feels like -1, but everybody relatively mild. Ottawa, for example, at 7 through Kingston at 5 through Niagara at 6. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long range forecast. We will break down the active weather on the way for New Year's Eve and look ahead to 2025. But right now it's back to Natalie and Nathan.
Okay, thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
Now 2 tributes for former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who passed away yesterday at his home in Georgia.
Carter was America's 39th president. He died at the age of 100. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin reports.
My name It's Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
He was a down-home, jeans-wearing peanut farmer from Georgia, an unlikely president who promised to heal the country after Watergate and war.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
Pardoning hundreds of thousands of Vietnam draft dodgers on his first day. His service to his country began as a young Navy lieutenant, leading a team to help the Canadians clean up a nuclear meltdown at Chalk River in Ontario, one of the few to go inside the damaged reactor. A man of deep Christian faith, he became an activist in the Democratic Party.
I want to introduce to you the great Allman Brothers.
His passion for music made him a populist politician, earning him the nickname Rock and Roll President. And through it all, his closest advisor, his wife, Rosalind, who blazed a trail of her own.
Well, the best thing I ever did was marrying Rosalind.
The former First Lady dedicated herself to humanitarian work, a fierce advocate for mental health, giving her husband guidance throughout their marriage, a love story until her death at 96. Jimmy Carter praised his wife as an equal partner in everything I ever accomplished. Life partners. Carter's presidency is best remembered for the Camp David Accords, that three-way handshake seen around the world, cementing an historic peace treaty between Egypt and Israel.
So proud of both of you.
But on his watch, Americans were taken hostage in Iran. That and a bad economy led to Carter's crushing defeat.
I wish I had sent one more helicopter to get the hostages, and we would have rescued them, and I would have been reelected. But that may have...
The hostages released the day after Carter lost to Republican Ronald Reagan, but never bitter, ever humble. It was Carter's Nobel Peace Prize winning efforts post-presidency that made a mark, building homes for the poor, monitoring elections around the world, resolving conflicts in search of peace.
I would hope that 50 years from now, whatever, that people would associate the words peace and human rights with my name.
Fighting off cancer in his 90s, Carter defied the odds to reach another milestone, becoming the longest living president in U.S. history.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Even returning to Sunday school in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, spending his final days in hospice. Carter was the 39th U.S. president, but as he would have said himself, that was just the beginning of a life well lived. Joy Malbin, CTV News, Washington.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump paid tribute to Carter, saying in part, the challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we all owe him a debt of gratitude. And the Prime Minister is also offering his condolences, saying Jimmy Carter's legacy is one of compassion, kindness, empathy, and hard work. He served others both at home and around the world his entire life, and he loved doing it. He was always thoughtful and generous with his advice to me. May his selfless service continue to inspire us all for years to come.
A funeral will be held today for Toronto Police Detective John Park.
Family, friends, and colleagues will gather at 1 o'clock to say goodbye to the officer. Park passed away after experiencing a medical episode while executing a search warrant on December 19th. His funeral service will be held at Bayview Glen Church on Steeles Avenue East in Thornhill. A crowdfunding page has been created to help pay for Park's funeral and to support his widow and children. Park was a 14-year veteran of the force who had been serving as a member of the hold-up squad. 179 people are now confirmed dead after a plane slammed into a wall during an emergency landing in South Korea over the weekend.
The Sunday morning crash is being called the deadliest air accident in the country's history. CTV's Jeremy Charon reports.
A tragic aviation disaster in South Korea. This passenger plane burst into flames after skidding off the runway and slamming into a concrete wall. The Boeing 737's landing gear failed to deploy as it belly landed at Muon International Airport outside Gwangju Sunday. All but 2 of the 181 people on board the plane were killed. Both survivors were crew members.
사과의 말씀을 올립니다.
The airline's CEO offered his condolences and apologized for the crash, vowing support for the families of the victims. Many of whom gathered at the airport in agony as the names of those killed were announced. She was almost home, says 71-year-old Jean Ji-young, whose daughter died in the crash.
정부는 제주항공 여객기 사고
South Korea's acting president declared the crash site a special disaster zone, promising to support recovery efforts. Investigators say the plane's black boxes have been recovered.
So we'll be able to hear everything that took place in the cockpit conversation-wise between the pilots and the flight attendants, and the pilots on the radio. We'll also have the positions of all the controls.
Transport officials say the plane was attempting to land when air traffic control gave a bird strike warning, forcing the plane to hold off. The pilot is said to have called Mayday just minutes later and tried to land the plane.
I think this investigation's got a long way to go till we get all the facts resolved.
South Korea is set to lead an investigation into the crash, and the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board says it's sending a team in to help. A week-long mourning period was declared for what is being called the country's deadliest air accident.
In a social media post, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the crash tragic and heartbreaking, adding Canada sends its condolences to the victims' families. Jeremy Cheryl, CTV News, Ottawa.
Funerals have been held in Azerbaijan for the pilots and a flight attendant of the passenger jet that went down in Kazakhstan. The flight crew was laid to rest yesterday with full honors. They are being celebrated in Azerbaijan for helping 29 people survive the incident. 38 people, including the pilots, died when the jet crashed into a field in Kazakhstan. It was en route to Chechnya, but Russia says the region was under a Ukrainian drone attack at the time. So far, evidence suggests the plane was hit by a Russian anti-aircraft missile. Russian President Vladimir Putin has apologized to Azerbaijan's president for the incident without directly taking responsibility.
It's an admission, but not official in the sense of accepting liability. But, there is overwhelming evidence that Russia shot this down. And the fact that Putin actually got up there and provided an apology, there's no investigation needed on this one. Russia did shoot this airplane down, and it was a tragic mistake. And also illustrative of just how poorly trained the Russian air defense gunners are.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev said yesterday that there were clear attempts at a cover-up, with Russia sharing what he called absurd versions of what took place. The Kremlin says its investigation is ongoing.
Now to Halifax in the investigation of a fiery landing of an aircraft there.
Dramatic video shows sparks and flames shooting out beneath one wing on Saturday, and amazingly, no one was hurt. CTV's Jonathan McInnes reports.
The video is dramatic. Shot by a passenger aboard a PAL Airlines flight from St. John's to Halifax Saturday night. By all accounts, the approach and landing was normal. Then something went wrong.
Then it got louder, and then all of a sudden a big bang and the plane tilted to the left.
That's when they say fire broke out. The flight was an Air Canada Express operated by PAL Airlines. In a statement from an Air Canada spokesperson, a suspected landing gear failure is to blame.
Then I start seeing smoke and fire on the left side of the plane, and then it came to a halt about 200 meters down the runway, and then we all evacuated. The smoke started coming in.
Thomas Avery and Charlie Toms are part of a rugby team from Newfoundland in the city for training. They say the evacuation was orderly and emergency vehicles were on the scene within minutes.
The fire engines were pretty quick to respond. We were on the runway for a bit before any buses came to get us.
The fire crew came, and they very quickly obviously doused the plane with whatever they doused the plane with.
The incident closed the airport for an hour and a half. One runway did reopen, but not before a number of other flights were canceled, diverted, or delayed.
Right now, the aircraft remains on that closed runway pending the Transportation Safety Board sending personnel here to conduct their own investigation.
Pretty scary. Looking back at it, it could have gone a lot worse.
73 people were aboard the plane. No serious injuries are being reported. Jonathan McGinnis, CTV News, Halifax Stanfield International Airport.
We have more now on our top story and the TTC's plans to avoid overcrowding at Union Station on New Year's Eve. TTC spokesperson Stuart Green joins us now with the latest. Stuart, let's set the scene first of all for New Year's Eve. This must be one of the busiest nights for the TTC.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, I think it's busy for everybody in the city of Toronto. But we know that in the last couple of years, the events down the waterfront that the city puts on have brought in upwards of 200, 250,000 people, many of whom were taking the TTC that night. So there are a number of changes that are happening, particularly around Union Station, with respect to how you access Union Station. The city has made the decision to close Union Station access from the exterior, except to get into the TTC through an entrance just south of Front Street on Bay. That's the only way into the TTC station. As well, you'll have access to the GO platforms as well. But yeah, it's a huge event, and it's all free, of course, which is great. And we're going to have extra service. We're going to have extra people out. Just hoping everybody has a safe and fun night.
We're looking at video here of the issue last year when so many people were crowding Union Station. This new plan of yours is looking to avoid a repeat of that kind of crowding.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, to be clear, it's not our plan. The city made the decision to close Union Station. What we're doing is accommodating that. The city put safety first. They're trying to avoid that crowding. But what it means is that people will have to access the TTC station differently because of the city's decision. And we understand it. We get why. I mean, as you say, that video is pretty compelling as to why you don't want people crowded in there. So certainly, we'll have people out there to get you into the station, or conversely, don't go to the Central Waterfront. I mean, there are options that the city has got at Sherburne Common in the East End, at Bathurst Common in the West End. We'll have extra service to both of those locations as well. If you do find yourself in the Central Waterfront and it's during that busiest time, sort of between 12:15 and 12:30, our suggestion is to maybe look for another station like King or Queen, Osgoode or St. Andrew. They will be options as well. The subway gates themselves will be open, so the flow of people should be quite good, assuming we don't have any delays, which might be beyond our control, of course. But we'll manage if that happens as well.
Okay, so the best advice then is to plan ahead for people who are going to be going to and from the downtown core on New Year's Eve.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and it's going to be free, correct, for transit takers?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's free all night. The TTC is free. GO Transit is free right up until 8 a.m. on New Year's Day. So it's a great way. We don't do surge pricing, unlike others. So we strongly encourage people to take transit that night.
Very good. Thank you very much. The TTC's Stuart Green with the latest.
Well, drivers who use the 407 toll route in Ontario as part of their commute will soon be paying more. For the first time in 5 years, the fees on the toll highway will be going up January 1st. The increase for light vehicles ranges from 3 to 14 cents per kilometer. In addition to the new tolls, camera charge and transponder fees will also be increasing. The increase is expected to cost transponder make that users an average of $8 more per month.
Now to a crash in Etobicoke that injured 7 people, including 2 children. It happened last night at the intersection of Eglinton and Scarlett Road. 2 children and 5 adults suffered minor injuries and were taken to hospital in stable condition. The cause of the collision is under investigation. It is unclear whether any charges will be laid. The province's police watchdog is investigating after an officer fired a gun at a 56-year-old man who allegedly stabbed someone with a knife and threatened others with a staple gun at a West End apartment. Officers responded to the stabbing call at this apartment building Saturday, 190 Woolner Avenue, near Jane and St. Clair. Investigators say police found the suspect in the hallway. He approached them with a staple gun, and officers then discharged a sock round and a taser. The Special Investigations Unit says the suspect then barricaded himself in his apartment unit and that one officer fired a gun, but the man was not struck. The SIU has assigned 3 investigators and 2 forensic officials to the case.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is being urged by the Atlantic Liberal Caucus to resign as party leader. A letter dated December 23rd was publicly shared yesterday by New Brunswick MP Wayne Long. It says the events that followed the resignation from cabinet of Chrystia Freeland, along with signals from the opposition parties to declare non-confidence in the government, make it no longer tenable for Trudeau to keep leading the party. Conservative MP John Williamson plans to introduce a non-confidence motion at a Public Accounts Committee meeting on January 7th, with hopes it'll be passed and forwarded to the House of Commons for vote. CTV political commentator Scott Reid says this is another major blow to Trudeau's leadership.
This, as you point out, is public. And that tells you that the caucus feels that it needs to take that added measure, that it can't just count on a private communication being taken seriously by the Prime Minister, but they need to exert that public pressure to publicly express their dissatisfaction with his leadership as a means of trying to influence and pressure him in the public arena to leave.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says he is continuing to engage with fellow world leaders, including the President of Ukraine. Justin Trudeau wrote on social media on Sunday that he spoke to President Zelensky to offer unwavering support and solidarity to the Ukrainian people who have spent another Christmas under attack. He said, "We discussed our shared concerns about the Azerbaijan Airlines crash and Russia's ongoing war of aggression. As president of the G7 next year, I reiterated the importance we place on peace and freedom for Ukraine."
It's enough to leave a bad taste in your mouth. 2024 marked a record high for beef prices in this country.
And looking ahead to next year, industry experts say those prices are only going to get harder to stomach. CTV's Scott Lightfoot digs into the story.
Preparing this prime rib, Mason Shirk isn't bullish about the price of beef.
If we were to buy now, we'd have to charge $20 to $30 a pound more this year versus last year.
The owner of Scarborough's HQ Meats is among those having a hard time swallowing rising meat prices in this country.
Right now, more than ever, I definitely think it's become outrageous.
And experts predict it's only going to get worse.
The prices are definitely a little higher than what they've been in the past.
From the farm to the fork, the price of Canadian beef is expected to continue climbing in 2025.
They're likely going to rise even more over the next couple of years, unfortunately.
This year, the price of beef reached an all-time high in Canada. A kilo of ground beef now averaging $13, compared to just $10 only 4 years ago. A sirloin steak averaging around $22, compared to just under $16 back in 2016.
We've seen an incredible demand for Canadian beef. The consumer, they're really looking to put beef on the center of their plates.
Global demand for Canadian beef is up, but supply is down. That's due to a variety of factors, including a rise in costs when it comes to feed, fuel, farming equipment, and of course, inflation. There have also been weather-related issues as well.
We've seen a decline in the Canadian cattle herd since 2020. It's drought-related. There is a smaller supply of beef. And in that instance, we do rely on imports.
According to Statistics Canada, fewer Canadian farmers are choosing to raise cattle these days. StatsCan says herds have declined 8% in the past decade.
The inventories are as low as they've been since, I think, 87.
And for those still involved in cattle farming,
at this point, we're basically breaking even on most of our cattle. If not, we're maybe losing a little bit of money.
Increasing cattle supply isn't as simple as turning on a tap.
You're looking at 2.5 to 3 years to get a calf on the ground. And then another 6 to 9 months after that to raise it up to a marketable size.
In the meantime, some worry that consumers are being offered lower quality choices to make up for increased costs.
If you look at the concept of shrinkflation, you see package sizing getting smaller. Essentially, they're doing the same thing with beef. They're leaving the prices the same, but it's just the quality is substantially lower than it's ever been.
Mason Shirk says he'll keep buying and butchering the best quality beef he can find, but he knows it will come at a price for his business and his customers.
It's a mess right now.
Scott Lightfoot, CTV News.
We step into a brand new month as we head in towards the middle of the week and a brand new year, and that comes with new monthly norms. Now, it has been relatively mild throughout the entire month of December and almost the entire winter season, and that trend isn't going anywhere as we step in towards January. Now, we should be seeing highs around -1, but we hold on to temperatures well above that seasonal mark until at least the middle to end of the first full week of January. Coming up, I'll have a full look at your long-range forecast. We'll break down the active weather we are likely to see as we head in towards New Year's Eve, and what you can expect for the first few days of 2025. All those details after the break.
All right, looking at the forecast, a few days ago it was very cold, and then suddenly we had this warm up, and now it's the wet weather. That's the story.
I was tobogganing like 4 or 5 days ago. I think it was
Not
Christmas
today.
Eve. Yeah, very, very different weather story today.
It is such a kind of a trend that we have seen really settle in over this winter season, as we'll have, a couple days of what should be typical winter weather, and then it is gone. We're back above seasonal. The rain is here, and the snow we had for Christmas Eve, Christmas morning is gone. And as we step in towards these last few days of 2024, we step into New Year's Eve tomorrow night. We are holding on to temperatures well above seasonal and a whole lot of wet weather. Weather is brought to you by Lee Presler Law Firm. Injury lawyers you don't pay unless they win. Now, It's been windy. This is from Whitby earlier. We saw the wind kicking up. The weather is not great, if I'm being perfectly honest, outside. It's not the worst, but it's not great. It is wet, it is windy, and that is not changing as we head throughout the entirety of our day. The downtown core is seeing mostly just rain. If you're in the GTA, we're looking at kind of a rain-snow mix, so it's not accumulating per se, but it is a mess. So if you're heading out, make sure you just give yourself that extra time. And we're still watching for the chance of some ponding and pooling on the roads. Taking a look at our temperature map, it is mild. We are sitting right now at 5 degrees. We're feeling right around the freezing mark at 7 through Ottawa, 6 in Windsor. Timmins is sitting at the freezing mark. Moosonee is at 1. Everybody kind of sitting in a bit of a ridge when it comes to our jet stream, kind of cutting off some of that colder air to extreme northwestern Ontario. For us, it is a much different story. We'll kind of sit around 4 or 5 degrees as we head throughout the day today. We've just bumped up in the last few minutes. It'll still feel around -1, and almost everybody is still contending with a bit of a wind chill because of that really strong westerly wind. Into this evening, we're sitting around 2 degrees. It should be -8, and everybody holding on well above that seasonal point. Again, the bulk of this system, the low is sitting north of us, but we have a few of those troughs, those blue dotted lines extending off of that main low that are bringing that kind of messy weather throughout the day today and all that wind. We get a bit of a break overnight and into the start of the day tomorrow before another system comes in, starting down towards, say, Windsor and London, and then pushing up towards the GTA, just in time for a lot of those evening celebrations, coming with rain and then changing over to snow. So for the rest of our afternoon, we get a bit of a break. We're just holding on to cloud cover as we wrap up our Monday. We step into the final day of 2024 tomorrow. Again, generally cloudy, maybe a few peaks of sunshine. The active weather for the GTA pushes in kind of late afternoon. It's scattered across southwestern Ontario throughout the day, but for the downtown core, the GTA proper, it begins late afternoon and continues into the early evening. As the clock strikes midnight, we're still watching for that messy weather, and then as temperatures shift a little bit, it cools down, we're watching for the likelihood of snow as we head in towards January 1st. So keep that in mind. It is going to be a challenging travel day tomorrow if you're heading out in the later half of the afternoon. So if you're traveling anywhere for New Year's or just to visit people, do it in the morning or early in the day. Temperature-wise, well above seasonal today, tomorrow, and that continues into the evening. We step into 2025 with some snow as we head into those first few days, and then we eventually get back towards a more seasonal point. Natalie.
Okay, thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
Still to come on CTV News, the legacy of Y2K 25 years later, remembering the mad rush on New Year's Eve to stock up on emergency supplies. That's just ahead. Canada's World Junior Hockey team is hoping to bounce back after a surprising loss to Latvia in round-robin play.
The Canadians were looking for redemption in their game against Germany last night. It was another tight one for the Canadian squad. They were leading 1-0 until late in the third period when they added an insurance marker and an empty net goal to win 3-0. Canada now faces the rivals from the south of the border in a New Year's Eve showdown. It's the final game of the group stage and will determine who takes first place in the pool. And for a preview of the big game, we're joined now by TSN's Mark Masters. Mark, how big a test is it, this game against the U.S. on New Year's Eve?
It's a huge test. The Americans are the other big favorites in this tournament. And for Canada, they're looking to kind of keep going here. They got to kind of build some momentum ahead of the knockout stage. The Americans actually doubled them up in goals scored so far in the preliminary round in the 3 games. So I'm sure Canada, it's a huge game in terms of the stakes in the standings. It's a huge difference finishing first, or potentially they could finish third if they lose that game here tomorrow night, which would mean a much more difficult opponent in the quarterfinals. So sky-high stakes and a great rivalry on display tomorrow night here.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a good game. So Canada loses to Latvia. The U.S. crushes Latvia. The U.S. loses to Finland. Canada beats Finland. Canada's at home. Are they the favorites to win the tournament?
I don't know if I would say they're the favorites to win the tournament. I mean, you just can't say that after what we just saw the last couple of games. They lose to Latvia for the first time in the history of this tournament, one of the biggest upsets in the history of this tournament, and it was very tight against Germany, surprisingly so last night. So I can't sit here and say Canada is now the favorite to win this tournament. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they go on to win it and they find a way to get the offense going. But the Americans are the defending champions. They got 10 players back from that gold medal win last year. Right now, you'd probably say the Americans are the favorites to win this tournament.
And what about like the Czechias and the Swedes? How good are they?
They look pretty good. They're in the other pool, and that's been the easier pool. There's not as much depth on that side of the bracket, but they're doing what they're doing, and I'll be intrigued to see who comes out on top of their game. Sweden against Czechia on New Year's Eve, which is kind of the appetizer ahead of the main course of Canada against the U.S. here on New Year's Eve.
So Leaf fans are watching Easton Cowan closely. How good is he looking?
Well, he's leading the team in scoring, 3 points. He found a way to help jumpstart the power play last night. He's on the top line. I thought he was really good last night, actually. I thought he got his legs going. I thought he was kind of back to his old self. He wasn't happy with the way he played against Latvia. He said he was much better than that, and I think he did raise his level in that game last night. He's another guy that if Canada's going to win the gold medal, we're going to be talking about Easton Cowan a lot. I thought he took a step forward last night, and I think he's probably going to look to raise his game even more tomorrow night.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to watch. TSN's Mark Masters, thank you.
Now to the growing popularity of women's hockey. It is fast and it is fierce.
And the growing recognition comes thanks in large part to the success of the inaugural PWHL season as girls across the country get in the game. CTV's Lawrence Brisson-Dubry reports.
More girls and women than ever are lacing up their skates and hitting the ice. The rising popularity of women's hockey is driven by inspiration, believes hockey coach Hannah Bunton.
They always say if you can see it, you can dream it. And I feel like that applies for sure to the women's professional sport.
In the 2023-2024 season, a record 108,000 women and girls were registered in Hockey Canada programs, nearly 20% of all participants, the highest in Canadian hockey history. This milestone coincides with the launch of the Professional Women's Hockey League in 2024, a turning point, says Danielle Sauvageau, general manager of Montreal's PWHL team.
This is when we realized this is now part of the sporting industry.
While teenage girls have historically drifted away from sports, hockey expert Daniela Ponticelli hopes that trend is changing.
How great is it if we can keep more young girls and women invested in sport, because there's a future, and that part is so key.
The growth of women's hockey isn't just about playing, she adds. It opens doors to roles in coaching, team management, and broadcasting.
These are all now even better opportunities and possibilities for everyone.
At this skating rink in Rosemont, some Montrealers say they are amazed to see how far the women's sport has come.
We're very proud of our girls.
The opportunity that women has to play hockey or even other sports, it's like, I feel it's very good.
It's also inspiring young players to pick up the game. But Bunton says there's still work to do.
Continuing to have the conversation and having it accessible for people to watch.
It's also time to expand the scope of coverage, she adds, highlighting the upcoming U18 Women's World Championship.
It's hard to be able to find a stream to watch those games. And it's also really great hockey, and that's the next generation that's going to enter the PWHL.
And Ponticelli says university teams also deserve more attention.
That means not only fans coming out and supporting those levels, but interest from outside organizations, media, all of that.
With more support and a growing spotlight, women's hockey is set for an even bigger future in 2025. Laurence Brisson-Dubreuil, CTV News.
Still to come, Drake has gone out of his way to make the holidays special. We'll have the details after the break.
Where were you a quarter century ago in the days leading up to the new millennium, amid concerns over a Y2K computer catastrophe? We all remember it well. Can you believe it was 25 years ago? CTV tech analyst Carmi Levy was one of the IT specialists on the front line at that time, working to ensure there was no computer chaos, and he joins us now. Carmi, let's start with recapping exactly what was the big concern here when the calendar was set to flip from 1999 to a new millennium.
The problem went back a number of decades, Natalie, is that in the early days of computers, so think back to the late 40s from the first general purpose computers to the early 50s when the first mainframes were being crafted and put into service, the memory was very expensive back then. So a lot of the coding, the software that was used to drive them only used two digits for the date. So instead of saying, say, 1989, it would say 89, which for most computation wasn't a problem. But of course, when we got to the year 2000, that would be a problem if you were making calculations based on the year. That might it might cause a lot of programs to crash. It might cause a lot of calculations to be wrong. The worry was that around the world, all of these systems that used 2-digit dates would suddenly just kind of freak out as soon as we ticked over from 1999 to 2000. So it set off a process of years of companies around the world, governments, agencies, updating their software, making sure that that bug was engineered out of existence. They switched from 2 to 4 digits, but the only way to know that all of that updating worked was, of course, to stare at these systems overnight at New Year's on 2000 and make sure that everything worked. I was one of those people, and I think some of the gray hair that I have comes from that.
Yeah, everyone was watching that countdown so closely when the clock struck midnight. What happened?
Oh, nothing. I mean, I think it's a testament to just how many resources were put into this. Hundreds of billions of dollars of effort, millions of software developers and coders and business analysts and quality assurance experts, all making sure that years, decades of code had been brought into the new millennium. And so for all of that effort, there were some glitches here and there, some apps, some software crashed here and there, some services weren't available, but they were very quickly fixed. The large-scale global catastrophe that some doomsayers said would happen absolutely didn't. And we got off pretty lucky. And I think we learned a lot of things along the way on how to build systems that are more resilient, on how to ask even more probing questions when we're originally designing software to make sure that we don't leave these latent bugs sort of buried deep in the system, in the code. And so I think it was good for the industry. I think it put a lot of visibility onto these things, and it made tech visible to the non-tech audience, which up until then really hadn't been a thing. So good from bad, let's call it. And I think we have better technology today because of how we responded to the Y2K challenge.
You talk about lessons learned there. Could this kind of potential computer glitch ever creep up again?
I think it absolutely can. And in some cases, it already has. For example, there was a latent issue with the way GPS satellites and systems calculate dates. And so in 2009 and in 2019, there was a problem as those dates rolled over. The software had to be updated. Some older 32-bit systems have problems with the year 2038, so YK38. And those need to be updated or replaced as time goes on. So we've taken those Y2K lessons and applied them to other cases where old, obsolete software, old, obsolete technology could be problematic in the future. And I think the fact that we don't have global headlines on these other glitches is testament to the fact that those lessons from Y2K were applied. We're never going to face this kind of issue going forward.
Okay, CTV's technology analyst, Carmi Levy. Thanks as always, Carmi. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Natalie. You as well.
Some lucky Canadians might consider it a Christmas miracle when they got an unexpected phone call from one of the country's biggest artists.
It was Drake behind the holiday hype. CTV's Kamal Karamali has the story.
We have so much more to give away.
In a hip-hop holiday live stream, one of Canada's most iconic musicians,
We'll send you something nice home.
Drake, handing out hundreds of thousands of dollars in Christmas prizes.
I'm like shaking right now.
There was the Belleville, Ontario mother who lost her son, gifted a dream vacation.
Yeah!
The Ottawa friends getting a trip to Australia.
Let it out. Let them tears fall, baby.
The Toronto mom, also a student in debt, winning $250,000.
No way.
And then there's Nima Nazeri,
What the hell?
the Toronto comedian, receiving $100,000.
I was like, what? No way. I was like, what?
How much weed did you smoke, bro?
It's been a nearly 10-year journey for Nima, quitting school to take a gamble on stand-up comedy.
Listen, idiot.
Posting skits and impressions on social media, now racking up 500,000 followers.
We're giving you $100,000 USD.
All of it leading up to this, being recognized for his hustle by a Canadian music legend,
Hi, Mr. Drake.
who even met his mother.
I am very happy and I am proud of him.
It's just now, in this moment,
It's because I told myself I wasn't going to get emotional about it, but
the gravity of it all finally hitting him.
this wouldn't have happened if I didn't believe in myself from the beginning. So that's why it's making me emotional.
And a promise from Drake to appear in one of his sketches, but for now, there's another focus.
So the big question, Nima, what are you going to do with the $100,000?
We're honestly going to put this into hiring more people to help the content.
to hope that one day he's a big enough star to give this moment back to someone else. Kamil Karamali, CTV News, Keswick, Ontario.
Well, raccoons may be the trash pandas of Toronto, but opossums are now out and about in the GTA, and they're here to stay.
The mischievous marsupials have begun making a home for themselves in our region. CTV's Beth McDonnell has more on their trek north and how they're adapting.
Clinging to trees and scurrying in yards, opossums are making themselves at home in the GTA. How they look depends on who you ask.
Super interesting. They have the little tiny babies that crawl up into the pouch, and they have a possibility of having 13 babies.
They do look ugly. They got this weird looking teeth.
I actually think they're fairly cute. They've got sort of a pointy nose.
The Royal Ontario Museum's Burton Lim says these marsupials originated in South America. He studied one of their close relatives there and says opossums are becoming more common in Ontario.
150 years ago, they weren't even recorded in this area, but people have been saying that they have been coming further north because of climate change. Things are getting warmer, so there's not as much snow cover. So that has allowed the opossums to expand into Canada.
Animal behavior professor Suzanne McDonald first spotted one in Toronto 20 years ago. She's trying to figure out how many opossums are here, where they are, and how far they're going. The furthest she's found so far was Sega Beach.
They're not equipped for our winters, so they have that crazy long rat-like tail, which is disturbing to many people, but it's not set up for the winter, and neither are their little ears, which I find adorable.
Which she says leads them to get frostbite and die. Some opossums, though, can end up at places like the Toronto Wildlife Centre. McDonald says opossums don't have their own dens and share with other animals. As they go out at night for food in the cold, she's looking at ways backyard shelters can keep these non-invasive newcomers safe.
They don't dig, they don't destroy things, they don't climb into your attic like a raccoon.
Known as nature scavengers, she says they have 50 teeth. In the city, Lim says they like garbage and will eat just about anything, sometimes mice and frogs, but often roadkill, which can also put them in danger. Orkin Canada responded to as many as 15 opossum calls in the Toronto area this year, mostly in commercial warehouse-type areas.
Do they bite?
If they're defending themselves, sure, they would defend just like anybody would. But are they going to come up and attack you or attack a dog or a cat or something like that? Generally, no. They keep to themselves. They're beneficial, and we just kind of let them go and do what they're going to do.
Trying to adjust to the lay of this new land. Beth McDonnell, CTV News.
Coming up on CTV News, some inspiration to pick up a pen and get back to holiday handwriting. That story just ahead.
Well, if you have yet to write thank you notes this holiday season, this next story might inspire you to pick up a pen.
Here is CTV's Nick Moore with the story of one entrepreneur's heartfelt tribute to her mother's handwriting habit.
The throwback of taking time for a handwritten note of gratitude is for Emily Summers just how it's always been.
We were a thank you card family.
And Summers has her mother to thank for that.
She made us write a thank you card for everything that we ever received, whether it was birthdays, Christmas, grad gifts, you name it.
Being kind and polite were values that Saunders Thompson held high. The former elementary school teacher taught generations of children how to read and how to show respect. Saunders passed away in 2007. Summers has kept to the handwritten note tradition and actually began hand painting them a few years ago. In 2016, the passion became an endeavor after rediscovering a photo from 10 years earlier of her mother and daughter just after being born.
Her first Christmas was my mom's last Christmas. So I started really thinking about my mom, because when you lose somebody, you don't know when those moments are necessarily going to pop up. But I just started thinking fondly of the kind of person that she was. And I thought, maybe this is the year. Instead of hand painting the cards, I'll just make some prints. And I'm going to put a little message about my mom on the back.
The cards were a hit, and over the better part of a decade have grown to include a collection of originals featuring local landscapes and everyday joy, all with the Saunders signature of thank you included.
The act of writing the thank you note feels just as good sometimes as the receiving part. So it helps everybody.
Summers donates a portion of sales to various cancer charities. As for what she thinks her mother would think about the tribute,
I'm hoping that she would like it because she was always really supportive of us growing up with anything creative that we would do. So, and she was a creative person herself. So I'm just glad that I get to tell her story.
a legacy of courtesy hitting all the right notes. Nick Moore, CTV News, St. Stephen, New Brunswick.